Welcome out to another episode of Draft is in Session. Will Decker here with the man, the myth, the legend, the madman. What is going on, brother?
Will, the thrill. Great to be here. And I don't know why. It feels like a while since we've been in this type of configuration again after Radio Row and all the great things with Draft is in session. So it's great to kind of reset the deck.
Yeah, our first post Radio Row podcast. So it does have a different feel to it. We were in person for so many of those interviews out in Los Angeles. It was a hell of a week, to say the least. I'm really looking forward to getting down there in the future, as I'm going to be making the move to Los Angeles come this summertime. So a lot more in-person pods for the listeners out there, which will be great. Yeah, how's the weather looking in LA right now?
Well, it's it's sort of a glorious mid-70s. We try to not speak too much of the weather to sort of get the bad juju from the rest of the country of envy. So, we try and hush that up. But LA is, as always, LA weather-wise.
I love it. I'm in an envious place as well up in San Francisco, about 60 degrees Fahrenheit from there. But speaking of things heating up a little bit, we can talk about some sleepers in the draft. The draft is getting closer. We got the combine next week. There's plenty of guys out there that I feel like are not getting the recognition they deserve. And some guys I feel like that you can plug into certain teams and certain schemes that could potentially be day one starters for some very competitive ball clubs. We're going to kind of go position through position. Jamal and I made two lists of our top 10 sleepers. We have not compared them. We have not seen them. So this will be a really fun kind of exercise to talk about who we're both pretty high on, who we're kind of lacking on, and just kind of describing who could make an impact to the next level that's not getting the attention. Jamal, I think the first position group we got to start with is the position group that is the most important. And quarterback is a hard place to find a sleeper, but I actually did come across a quarterback that I think is not getting the recognition he deserves that I really enjoy. Did you have any quarterbacks for the record?
Will, I did not out of my 10. And so, for me, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say, sort of assessing the position from my end. It just felt like there was sort of a lack of top-end talent, and it kind of made the entire class feel like a sleeper, just because I don't know if I have much faith in really anyone across the position. So I'm excited to hear your expert take.
And sleeper to me is like third round and on. So if you can get these guys in the third round and on, I think you should be feeling pretty confident about your pick. The guy for me is Carson Strong. And I think Carson Strong, there's a scenario where you could be looking back 3 to 5 years from now going, he was the best quarterback taken in this class. I don't think that's much of a hot take, given the uncertainty we do feel of the quarterback position. But this is a quarterback that I love. He's big, strong, and accurate. He's completed over 70% of his passes over the last 2 seasons. And he doesn't turn the ball over. I mean, he has an over 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He led all QBs in tight window throws from PFF. I'm going to be referencing them a lot throughout the podcast as I was able to do my research. Does have some injury concerns. I think that is kind of the main thing that's pushing him down a lot of draft boards. But, once you get to that 3rd, 4th, 5th round of the draft, it's all about taking the upside of a potential prospect because no one is close to being a guaranteed success from those rounds. I think if you can get Carson Strong as a backup quarterback, I'm also looking at the Los Angeles Rams. I know Stafford isn't going to be there forever. Might as well get a quarterback, develop him in the later rounds. I see a lot of positive things from Carson Strong there, and I feel really confident that he could, with the development, come in and just be an effective quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to be a star, but he could be kind of like a Kyle Orton, or a Davis Mills, so to speak, a guy that you put him in there, he's a backup, but you feel confident in your chance to win. Do you think that's a crazy take to have Carson Strong as kind of a sleeper quarterback?
No, Will, not at all. And as I was looking at Carson Strong, he was someone I looked a lot of film at, and he definitely has all of the physical tools, as you suggested. He's sort of a smaller Josh Allen, and when you talk about kind of the differences between Nevada and Wyoming, there's sort of a lot of kind of, if you were to pattern match as a GM, you'd sort of be anchoring off of how relative is he to sort of Josh Allen in that regard. I think he's got it all physically. There's no question about it. The concern for me on tape was with Nevada, and we had a conversation about this even as we were doing some live streams over the last few weeks, is that Nevada has really skinnied down the playbook. And there were a lot of simple routes being run by their receivers. It was a lot of, first read, second read, ball out. So my question for Carson Strong isn't the physical. For me, is it, can he take the cognition to the next level when you talk about the complexity and the nuance of an NFL offense? And so that's really the question for me. And that's why it's sort of hard to project, because that's something that you don't see on tape. That's something that you can't see in an all-star game. That's something that you can't see in these sort of 1v1 battles that we're having leading into the draft. And so that's kind of the biggest question for me. And that's something that I can't really get resolved prior to the draft. And that's why he wasn't on the board for me. But everything you're saying makes perfect sense.
And I think the quarterback position, to your credit, is it's 30% skill. It's maybe 70% or more, the mental aspect of it. How do I break down the defense? How do I react quickly? How do I show strength in my team and my teammates when we're down 10 or, we're on the final drive of a 2-minute drill? We got to win the game. That's hard to predict. That's what makes predicting the quarterback position so hard. But just even reflecting back to our Radio Row, conversation, we had Ryan Leaf on, a guy that's, covering the NFL draft, doing stuff for Pac-12 Network, things like that. We asked him who his quarterback was. He said he was really high on Carson Strong. And that kind of, made me go back and look at some of the tape. You can't predict the mental makeup of the quarterback, so to speak. But from what I've seen, I think there's a lot to like there for a guy that you could find in the 4th round. It's a gamble this year. And like I said, he could be maybe the top quarterback when all is said and done in 3 to 5 years. Enough with the quarterback. Let's move to I'm going to let you go with this position because I have no idea. What was the first guy on your board, positional wise?
So, Will, I had, it was sort of an interesting mix. For me, I had a couple of running backs. I had a tight end. I had a wide receiver. I had an offensive tackle. I had a safety, and I had 4 defensive linemen. So for me, that was kind of the mix of my top 10. I think keeping with the theme of offense, if you want to sort of stay there before we segue, maybe we go to running back a little bit. So we go from the most important position on the field to probably the most commoditized position on the field.
Exactly.
With running back. 2 guys, though, I think, again, to your point, Will, of kind of catching them late in the draft, could provide tremendous value to most NFL offenses. Because when I think of sleeper, I think of really 3 characteristics. One is I have to see on the field production. You have to sort of be a stat filler at your level. Second is, have you played in some big games, and how have you played in those big games? And then third for me is, how do you respond to adversity? And how do you sort of respond to the negative plays, injuries, penalties, so forth? And how have you evolved in terms of cleaning that up? Those are kind of the criteria I look for in trying to assess the sleepers. And I actually saw 2 guys at the running back position that I really like. One is Damien Price, running back out of Florida. 5'10", 215. So he's sort of lower center of gravity. He's a thicker guy, but he also has all of kind of the burst and the juke ability that you sort of want from a versatile running back, because the name of the game with the running backs is versatility if you're going to go even late round at that particular position. What I really liked about him is, again, played at the top level at Florida in the SEC, 100 carries, 574 yards, 13 touchdowns. So he doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires, but he's also very effective receiving the football. 19 catches, 216 yards, 3 touchdowns. And what I really loved was his production against the most elite of competition. 9 carries, 69 yards against the vaunted Georgia defense in the Georgia-Florida game. And so I think he can provide a lot of versatility to an NFL team in the backfield, receiving the ball, goal line situations, and also in kind of the screen game and trying to kind of get that home run run. And so I really like Damien Price as a value pick late. The other guy I really like at the running back position, and Will, as a Sun Devil, this will probably be your heart, is Mr. Rashad White. 6'2",
Yes,
210. To me, he's like a taller Alvin Kamara. And when you sort of look at how he broke down statistically this year, 182 carries, 1,006 yards, 15 touchdowns. The year before, as you and I have sort of discussed, the guy had 10 yards a carry, 42 carries, 420 yards. And then when you factor in 43 catches out of the backfield this year for 456, I mean, there's just incredible versatility that he provides. And when you look at him on film, he runs a 4.46, but he doesn't look that fast on film, and yet nobody can catch him. And, he's got the great feet. He's got that patience right at the point of attack, but then he can run you over. He can run through you. He can run around you. He's got the burst. I really like what I see out of Price and White as some gem picks with the right offenses. You can plug them in a lot of different positions and get a lot of value.
Well, the first overlapping player we have is Rashad White. So I will be checking that briefly, but I think the Price pick is spot on. Our buddy Mike Renner from PFF, who was just on the podcast a week ago on Radio Row, described him as an armored truck out there, like trying to tackle somewhat of that. He is a hard guy to bring down. He showed great numbers at Florida. I think that's an excellent pick. He was a guy that I definitely considered on the short list. I only kept it to one running back, and that was our guy, Rashad White. What I look for in the running back position, it's can they catch, can they run the ball, size, kind of home run threat. And he checks a lot of those boxes, if not all of them. And the one area he's been kind of inconsistent in, it's not from a lack of effort. I think it's more of a technique thing, is the pass blocking. But he is a big back. I expect him to get coached up at the NFL level by some of these running back rooms where blocking is a big thing. And if he can just check that other box, it's like, what else do you want from this guy? This guy can be a goal line back. He could be the rare 3-down back the way he's built at 6'2", 210 pounds. I expect him to add more muscle moving forward. And another thing that was pretty crazy was you talk about the tread on a running back's tires, which I think is, an underrated thing for a running back coming into the pro ranks. He only had 182 carries this past year. He was in kind of a committee of running backs as well as the quarterback. Jaden Daniels and DeMonte Traino, the running back that's transferred to Ohio State, they combined for 212 carries. So there was a lot of other carries coming elsewhere, in the ASU backfield. So you combine all those skills I said, lack of tread, you can get this guy coming in. I think this could be a home run pick when we're looking back on kind of like similar to Kamara, like you're saying, how did this guy last so long in the draft when he could be one of those top fantasy players when we think about it moving forward? So I love the Rashad White pick. I love the Price pick. I think we're off to a great start. How many receivers did you have is my next question.
So I had one.
What's up?
I had one.
You had one? Okay, let me count mine. I got one, and I've got a total of two. So I got two receivers. Do you want to hear my first one?
Go for it.
My guy is David Bell, and he doesn't blow you away, with the physicals. I mean, he's about 6'2", 205 pounds. But in a weird way, it kind of correlates to Drake London, who is a physical freak, in the fact where it's like, yeah, you could say everything. You can't stop him. You can line up. You could game plan for him. You knew it was coming with Purdue. He was the main source of offense there. They couldn't stop him. And he has 2,000-yard seasons to his credit. The year that, was COVID shortened, he only played 6 games, but he was well on his way to 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. His just ability to get open in tight spaces, I think, is really impressive. He has 33 catches in the red zone. That is 14 more higher than the next Big Ten receiver over that span since 2019. And then he's got 41 contested catches, which was shocking to me. That is the most in the Power 5, period, since 2019. Wow. This guy is able to make plays in the open field, 93 grabs, close to 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns. And the key factor I look at is we're talking about all these receivers at the top, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Guess who won the best receiver in the Big Ten this year? It was David Bell, So I think this guy can ball. I like him coming in day one and being a slot guy. He's not going to blow you away with the measurables, but another guy that didn't blow you away with the measurables, Cooper Kupp. and look what he's doing. Not to compare their games, not to say he's going to have a similar ceiling, but I think the physicality is overrated when the production is there. So that's my guy, David Bell. What do you think about that pick?
Will, I love that pick. And, we didn't have overlap there, but Bell is another guy that I looked at very closely. And he, if I had an 11th or a 12th, member of my list, it would certainly be Bell. I love him for all the reasons that you described. And everybody forgets that the Boilermakers nickname this year was the Spoilermakers, and they played some big time competition in the Big Ten this year, had some big time wins, and Bell played his best in those games and really was a focal point of their offense. This is the first time that Purdue really looked like a balanced offense with a lot of sort of nuanced passing elements since Drew Brees was there. And when they kind of, had what they used to call basketball on grass in the late 90s, early 2000s. And Bell was a huge part of that. I love his ability to catch contested passes. And that's something that's really going to be a skill very vital at the next level, where the windows are tighter, separation is harder to get. You have to rely more on your craft and your hands and that elusive catch radius that we talk about. So I completely agree. I think Bell is a really high quality pick, and I'm surprised that he's not being talked about more, considering he's from a Power 5 conference that gets a lot of notoriety.
And this is a program that just put out Rondale Moore last year, who we saw have success as a rookie with the Arizona Cardinals. Similar product, similar pipeline with Jeff Brom doing big things at Purdue. I'm interested to hear your take on the receiver, Jamal. No overlap with David Bell, but I want to see maybe if your receiver is the same one I have in our top 10.
So my guy, Will, is Calvin Austin III.
He was on my short list.
So it's great minds. It's like my father says, Will, either great minds think alike or fools seldom differ. But we'll take it as the former. So Calvin Austin III for me at 5'7", 173. Out of Memphis. What I really loved about him, again, the production, 74 catches, 1149 yards, 8 touchdowns, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. But what I really liked about Austin on film is he catches the ball with his hands. We talk a lot about kind of catch radius, very quick with his feet, but he's also a 3-level receiver. So you can sort of play him in the bubble screen game, in kind of the short spread game. He can run those intermediate sort of 12 to 15-yard inside slants to get some of those tough yards. And then, of course, he can kind of be your home run threat when you're trying to stretch the field vertically. And I think when you look at his frame, again, I think that theme of versatility comes into play, where you can put him at the slot a la Tavon Austin back in the day, but he's got the burst to then also stretch vertically. And so if he's your third receiver, fourth receiver, in some pass heavy sets, you're really going to be creating mismatches with either a nickel corner or potentially, a defensive player that's not as comfortable in pass coverage, and he's going to be able to exploit that. And so his versatility, the variety, the production across the board, I really liked Mr. Austin III.
I love Austin. And, the Senior Bowl tape, he was absolutely torching some of these defensive backs and one-on-ones. You mentioned he has over 2,000 yards receiving over the last 2 years, 19 touchdowns, big play threat at any given time. He could work in the slot, things like that. The one thing that kept me out from keeping Calvin Austin, and I'm the guy that's gone on record saying if you like a guy and he's undersized, take him because it could happen. This is taking it to an extreme for me because I looked up the ESPN article, or his stats and size, and just kind of read about him. He was 5'10", 162 pounds, like coming into his senior year. I know he's up past 170 now, but I'm getting very Tutu Atwell vibes, and these Rams fans are really already kind of punting on Tutu Atwell and the experiment there as a second-round pick.
And Will, with Austin, it's going to be interesting in terms of the measurables at the combine itself, because there's some reports that have him at 5'7", 5'8", and other reports have him at 5'10". And so it's going to be really interesting to see where he comes in. He didn't look that small on film, so I think that I'm probably leaning closer to sort of 5'10", maybe even 5'10 and a half, but that's going to be a real interesting take. But I love the production.
The production's there, and he's a kid I'm rooting for. I worked at Memphis before I came out to the West Coast. So Calvin Austin, I'm rooting for you, buddy. Keep things going strong. The second receiver I got is a Kentucky guy, formerly from Nebraska, Wan'Dale Robinson, 5'11", 185 pounds. Really was the highest graded SEC receiver since Devonta Smith over the last second only Devonta Smith since 2015 in the SEC. At 91.3. He's a game breaker that could be deployed in a similar effect as a Deebo Samuel. He broke 22 tackles at the receiver position this year. That is the most since the PFF started grading in the SEC. And there's a long list of great receivers there from the SEC. Just the change of pace he provides and the second level of speed he can get to. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy that I look at and go, if I can take an experiment on him in the 4th or 5th round, get him in the right offense where it can provide a lot of yak opportunities, maybe set up some packages specifically for a Wan'Dale Robinson. This could be a guy that could be a flex on a given week in fantasy football. I don't know if you know much about Wan'Dale Robinson, but this is a guy that I was really, really high on after watching his film and doing some research on.
Yeah, Will, me as well. And I think that what kind of just separated Austin from Robinson for me is that Wan'Dale Robinson, I think in terms of the measurables and the speed, his speed and his separation ability sort of jumped off of the film. He's a little bit raw as sort of a route runner. He's a little bit raw from a technique standpoint, but those are all very teachable things. And so for me, you mentioned it earlier, it's got to be the right system, the right coach. Can he get into the hands of a McVay or a Shanahan or a LaFleur or folks from that type of tree? And I think then he's really going to be set up for success. I think it's going to be situational, though, where if he's sort of expected as just a sleeper pick, as just the highest possible value, and the fit isn't there from a coaching staff, he may get lost in the shuffle. But I completely agree with your assessment. And again, Kentucky got off to that incredible start this year, 6-0, first time in over 55 years in school history. And Robinson was a huge part of that because he was either sort of a primary playmaker in their ability to move the ball, or he was the primary decoy. And so their ability to really have success is primarily predicated in the passing game due to Robinson.
I like Robinson. You made all fair points there. I think it's system based with him, like you were saying. So get him with the Stefanski, Kevin O'Connell that just went out to Minnesota. This guy can have some success. So we'll see what happens with our guy Wan'Dale. Let's move to the offensive line. This will be the last position group we do when it comes to our top 10 with that position group. Give me your thoughts on the offensive line. Did you have any guys? You said you had 4 off the top of your head.
I had 1 on the offensive line. I had 4 on the defensive line. The guy that really jumped off the page for me, I was sort of, the offensive line position has sort of changed for me, kind of pre All-Star circuit and then post All-Star circuit in terms of seeing some of these guys in their 1v1 matchups. Cordell Volson out of North Dakota State was really my guy. 6'6", 319 pounds. What I loved about him is, he came from a winning program, albeit FCS, played in a lot of big games, did a lot of things in high-pressure situations. But what was so impressive as a super senior this year for me is he only allowed 15 pressures and no sacks across 974 snaps this year.
Wow.
He was absolutely dominant at North Dakota State over the course of this year. And then when you sort of extrapolate that from an FCS competition perspective to an FBS competition, he won 47 of his 49 one-on-one matchups at the Shrine Bowl.
Wow. Yeah.
And so when you look at his lower sort of center of gravity, when you look at the feet, his ability to use his hands, his technique, he's physical. He can sort of just engulf defensive linemen, I just thought that Volson is a guy who's not getting nearly enough publicity. And I think primarily it's driven by the fact that he's not at a Power 5 or an FBS school. Volson's a guy that really impressed me, though, on film, statistically, and just everything that I've been hearing and reading about him.
And, thank God for things like the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, because it allows you to kind of gauge these prospects you wouldn't be able to watch otherwise. North Dakota State is the cream of the crop at that FCS school, but it takes some of these bowl games. I mean, we just saw with Christian Watson, a receiver that easily could have been on one of our lists. He didn't make mine, but, Volson could be that guy moving forward. For my offensive line group, the guy that I really went to Jamari Salyer. Have you heard of this guy from Georgia?
I have.
He was a baller, man, and I was very high on him. Loved what I saw from him. This guy allowed 0 sacks on the left tackle of an SEC team, and the film that really stood out for me was against Michigan in the college football semifinal game. He was tasked with going against Aiden Hutchinson just about every down. He went and, he held his own against arguably the top pick in the draft. You talk about playing well with competition there. It doesn't get much better than that for this upcoming draft. And you added the fact that he played every position on the line except for center this year, showed the versatility. That's what I look for in a lineman. Maybe you're not playing left tackle, but if we can get you in a guard, that could help the unit. That's a coach's dream for a guy to just be open to playing at different spots. Just combine that with how he fared against SEC talent edge, what he's able to do versatility-wise and allowing 0 sacks in that situation. He may be guard at the next situation more as a tackle, but Salyer is definitely a guy I think, if you can get that guy in the 3rd or 4th round, you got to feel feeling pretty freaking good about yourself. Loved what I saw from him. The other guy I got is Kellen Deich, Arizona State offensive tackle. There's a couple Arizona State guys in here. It was not a biased thing, just looking at the
I was about to say, Will's putting on it, forks up, baby.
Our football program cannot be talking at all right now. But when it comes to Kellen Deich, I saw a guy that was the highest graded left tackle in the Pac-12, over the past 2 years. Went to the Shrine Bowl, and you mentioned, the North Dakota State guy dominated. Deich didn't lose a single rep when it came to it out there. So you add the grading, you add the freak size, 6'7", 300 pounds, great feet, moves well. I think if you're like the Chargers at the top of, end of the 2nd round, maybe top of the 3rd, you might want to trade up or something like that. They're going to cut Brian Bulaga, who is a utter bust for them. If you can get Deich to complement, a Rashawn Slater on that other side, I think that could be a real pick, for the Chargers that could boost up their O-line group and help protect the asset of the organization, which is Justin Herbert. What do you think about Salyer and Deich as those 2 picks?
Yeah, Will, I love Salyer. I mean, when you talk about battle tested, right? I mean, you're talking about 9 to 10 games against SEC competition. And then the other primary game is, ho-hum, Aiden Hutchinson, who's arguably the number 1 pick in this draft. And so when you talk about being NFL ready, nobody can be necessarily as ready as Salyer in that regard. I think that those are both Deich and Salyer are great picks. Another team that I think comes to mind, Will, where tremendous value can be used for someone like Deich in particular, being such a freak, the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, when you talk about how, the Bengals might not be unrealistic in using all their picks on linemen. When you saw how that Super Bowl played out, the game against the Titans played out, and so forth. And protecting Joe Burrow is going to be, job 1, 2, and 3. And so I think that there's a lot of room. And when you look at both Deich and Salyer, great fits to sort of be infused into a winning organization, especially Salyer, to go from Georgia potentially to the Cincinnati Bengals, high stakes contender. There's a mindset, a cultural mentality there that doesn't show up on film and sometimes doesn't show up on the measurables and doesn't show up in the interviews. So I think those are both excellent observations.
They should pull a Panthers, as the Panthers did a couple of years ago. They drafted all defensive players. Yeah. Just draft all O-line. There's a strong case to be made that, the Bengals blew their Super Bowl chance by just not having any semblance of an offensive line. Because you look at the numbers, Tom Brady was sacked 22 times this year in the regular season. Burrow got sacked 19 times in 4 games. And that's not even including the pressures, which were into the, high 40s, early 50s. It was insanity to watch that play out as a whole. Madman, I'm going to turn to you here because I think the edge class is, as well as the D line for the most part, is a group that I feel like is getting their just due, at least the top guys.
Yeah.
I want to hear your takes of like the 4 guys you got on the defensive line because I'm interested. I didn't have any D linemen on my my top.
Yeah, 10. I've got a couple guys. Will 2 guys in the edge class, 2 D linemen. So we'll kind of start with the edge class. 2 smaller school guys. The first is Alif Ayad, defensive end, Western Michigan. Really love him. 6'2", 248. He had 40 tackles this year and 13 sacks at Western Michigan. When you look at him on tape, just incredible straight line burst. He's also got, the feet. He's got ghost rushes, spins, fake spins, a very explosive defensive end prospect, slightly undersized, but he makes up with it with his motor and just his explosiveness. And I think, he could be a really high value pick very late in this draft because, as we talked about, the edge class is so saturated with such great talent, but there is value on the back end. And so for some of these teams that have more pressing needs up front, you can still get value on the back end there. The other defensive end that I really loved was D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky. 6'4", 240. He had 94 tackles and 9 sacks this year. He was a super senior. He has 34 career sacks. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. Again, incredible straight line speed, but also that lateral quickness that makes NFL GMs really salivate, and this sort of ability to sort of pivot out of different offensive line formations, be able to do kind of different swim moves, do counters between your DNs and your D tackles. I think there's a lot of value there. And what really jumped out for me was, he had 9 tackles against each Michigan State and Indiana. So when you put him against Power 5 competition, his game was enhanced even to a greater level. And so both of these guys, they're specialists, they're pass rushers, incredible explosiveness, incredible production at some smaller schools. But I think they could make some teams very happy at the back end of this draft.
And I love the Malone pick because we talked about in extensive length about Jermaine Johnson being a guy that, yes, he's great rushing the passer, and that is a huge element to an edge rusher. But if you can play the run too, that is just shoring up a lot of concerns from that position. You mentioned D'Angelo Malone was able to play that high tackle games from a defensive end. Sign me up for that. Yeah. And you couple that with the point that he had 4 forced fumbles. He is trying to get turnovers on every time he's able to disrupt it, cause potential turnover situations for the defense. I'm all in on D'Angelo Malone, and I got a guy from Western Michigan a little later to that just didn't make the list, but I'm excited to bring him up. So this is my first kind of really diving into Farrell. So I'm excited that you mentioned him. I'm going to have to go study him some more after this podcast. Who are the 2 interior defensive linemen?
So the 2 interior linemen for me will, and it's hard to sort of be under the radar when you go to this particular school, but I also feel like Neil Farrell, defensive lineman from LSU, is not necessarily getting the buzz that traditionally somebody from LSU should. I think just, the man crushes that we have on that entire Georgia defense, Alabama's usually got their guys and so forth. He's really falling by the wayside. 6'4", 325. He had 45 tackles, 2 sacks this year, but an interior run stuffer. And he faced double teams constantly this year in the SEC, and he was able to shed them time after time on film. Very strong lower body, but he's got this exceptionally quick first step. And, he can play 1 technique, 3 technique. He's really good in that A gap. And even when he's not quick enough necessarily to be an effective pass rusher and get to the quarterback, very good with his hands. So the hand fighting with the offensive lineman, but also he gets his hands up to be able to sort of deflect passes and cause havoc in the passing lanes. again, against elite competition, 7 tackles and a sack against each Ole Miss as well as Alabama. So this was a guy that, he, again, when the lights got brighter, played even better and had to deal with the adversity of the double team. And so I really like what Neil Farrell brings to the table. And my other guy is Travis Jones, defensive lineman from UConn. 6'4", 326. He had 48 tackles this year, 4.5 sacks, 7.5 tackles for loss. He's basically everything that Farrell is, but he's also an above-average pass rusher. So he's sort of an eater of the run game, and he can plug in to those spaces and those gaps. But he, unlike Farrell, actually has the burst and the speed to finish it off in passing situations and get all the way to the quarterback and either play the hurry game or get the outright sack. And so these are 2 guys. I know we're just in awe of this pass rush and run blocking in terms of defensive line, just class overall. But these 2 guys just jumped off the tape for me as well.
And you made 2 excellent points on these 2 guys. Travis Jones was going to be a guy on my list, but I do think, like, with the combine, there's a chance this guy could move up because there's whispers that this guy could have a bench press in the record amount. I know you saw the clip. It has become Twitter famous right now. Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl, kind of the head of the Senior Bowl, tweeted this out. He stood up the Michigan lineman just with his right hand, just pushed him back 5 yards. That is brute strength at a different level, Madman. I mean, I was in awe of what I was able to see from him there. You look at the tape, he did show out against those big competition games, the Clemsons, the big name opponents that UConn was able to get on the schedule. So I love that pick. Neil Farrell Jr. too. Say what you want about Ed Orgeron as a head coach. The one area he's been specifically great at is the defensive line, dating back to his days at USC. That is what he is. He's a position coach that may have gotten some opportunities as a head coach. He did a phenomenal job with Neil Farrell, and both of these guys, we've tried to bring this back to Los Angeles. Chargers need a nose tackle.
No doubt.
From every Chargers fan we talk to, they don't want to reach on one in the first round with, Jordan Davis of, Georgia, who I think is a phenomenal prospect. But if you are willing to get maybe an edge rusher as well as a nose tackle in back-to-back rounds, this defensive line is going to be special with a guy like Boza on the right side. That is my hope for the Chargers. If they can get Jermaine Johnson at 17, go to the second round, maybe get a Travis Jones or a Neil Farrell. Man, you do that, your problem is pretty much gone if these guys hit where they're supposed to hit. So I love that. Madman, I got 2 linebackers on my list. Do you have any linebackers?
I don't have linebackers. Yes.
Ooh, I love it. Have you heard of Chad Muma from Wyoming? I am very, very high on this guy. And my thing with Muma, he might be one of my favorite overall prospects in the entire sleeper division. 6'3", 242-pound back, but he plays much faster than that. 142 tackles, 82 solo. This guy balled out at the Power 5 level, and he was, in terms of the other conferences, the American conferences, I think it's called the G5 is what they're all referred to, the MAC, the Mountain West, the Sun Belt. He was the highest graded linebacker among those, that were competing for that position. And normally I'd look at somebody like Wyoming and go, I don't know, maybe he can translate. Josh Allen was a unicorn when it comes to that. Maybe this guy's off. What gives me confidence is that Aaron Bull, the linebackers coach of Wyoming, coached up Logan Wilson, who was the starting linebacker for the Bengals this year and did a great job. And it's ironic. They're very similar players. Logan Wilson had 4 interceptions in the NFL this year at the middle linebacker positions, which I found very, impressive given what he is billed to be. Muma had 3 picks this year, and he took 2 of those to the house, like out-racing DBs and wide receivers to get to that end zone. So Chad Muma, I'm all in on this guy. I think he could be a potential, spoiler. I think I'm going to compare him to Sean Lee, if he can reach his ceiling, just from what I've seen. Great. Chad Muma is my guy. And if you can get him in the 3rd round, I'd feel very, very good about the prospects of him turning into a consistent starter. Not comfortable saying star yet, but the other guy that I got, Leo Chanal, 6'2", 261-pound linebacker. Think about that, 261-pound linebacker. It's rare to be putting a second-team All-American on the list of people that, are underrated to the NFL draft process. But Leo Chanal, 95 tackles, 8 sacks. If you're looking for a downhill guy, it's 4th and 1, 3rd and 2, you got to get a stop. This guy is just a bruiser. He plays faster than the 260 pounds that he's at. Apparently, he's supposed to run in the 4.6 range at the combine, which at 260 pounds, it just makes him a freak of nature. He may be moving up the draft board if that happens into the 2nd or 3rd round, if that were the case. But I love everything about this guy. I think he does have to improve a little bit in the passing game, but specifically if you were just to draft a guy for the run as a linebacker, he's in the top 5 of that list. And there's situations where I feel like he can be very effective. Give me your thoughts on Muma and Chanal, because I love both these guys, and I'd be happy if, a Rams or a Chargers was able to somehow pick this guy up, maybe in the later rounds, depending on that 40 time.
Yeah, well, with Muma, what I love is the responsibility of being essentially the captain of the defense and being able to be effective in pass coverage and also stopping the run. And I think that level of maturity and that understanding of the game is what makes him so valuable. We talked about, obviously, 142 tackles is a huge number. He's running around all over the place. The guy I thought of when I saw Muma, and, again, this was a guy that just missed for me, again, in terms of top 10, I thought of a guy like Zach Thomas from the Miami Dolphins. Well, I'm taking it back here, in terms of the early 2000s. His sort of feel for the game, his instincts, and he's just one of those guys who had a nose for the football. And you couldn't really sort of put your finger on how and why he was doing what he was doing, but he seemingly was always in the right place at the right time. So I agree with you with Muma, just in terms of his football instincts, his knowledge of the game, the level of responsibility that he's had, along with having to be effective in both stopping the run and the pass, I think makes him very attractive moving forward. With Chanal, I'll be honest with you, Will, I didn't think of him as a sleeper for exactly the reason you mentioned as a second-team All-American. I thought of him as a little bit more of a household name, but you're absolutely right. And how many times in the NFL we have seen games swing on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, 4th and 2, right? This is sort of the whole revolution that's taking place, particularly with the Chargers and other teams, about the analytics of the game and going for it. And so a guy like Chanal, even if you can't extract more value from him, even as a package 3rd and short, 4th and short guy that needs to beeline to the back, beeline to the quarterback, go and disrupt those plays, tremendous amount of value there. And I think there's much more to him than that, but even that alone will provide a lot of value.
Yes. And, Leo, it was hard for me to see him in these mock drafts where he's going in the 3rd or 4th round. Yeah. Because I just don't see him as that type of player. I think he's a day 2 guy in my heart of hearts at the very least. Combine will determine a lot of factors that are out of our control, but I think Leo Chanal, if he's on the board and you're in that third round, come on, man. Leo Chanal, that's hard to beat if you're in need of a linebacker like that. Secondary, I have one corner, I believe. One corner. I want to hear what you've got from the cornerback. You got one corner and one safety. I want to hear it.
I just have one safety.
One safety. I want to hear it.
So my guy in the secondary, Will, is JT Woods, safety out of Baylor. 6'2", 193. He had 57 tackles and 6 interceptions this year for a Baylor team that really had a historic run in terms of kind of school history and the incredible success that they had this season. What I love about Woods and where there's sort of a rarity there in the secondary position is that he's got great closing speed, which is obviously something you really need at the safety position. So he's got that long range ability to be fast and sort of close gaps down and be able to disrupt longer passes. But he's also very quick and has that twitch ability and that burst in the short range. And so that ability to sort of make a decision, disrupt a play, stay with a receiver on kind of a multiple receiver set. And so that ability to play kind of the short space game as well as the long space game really is what made him a ball hawk this year, and his fearlessness in terms of mixing it up. 57 tackles is a pretty high number, and 80% of those were of the solo variety. And so what I love about him is the physicality when a receiver even catches the ball, but also this ability to play both the short game as well as the long game. And so Woods was a guy to me that was very polished. I know we've talked a lot about secondary guys. You and I, the saucer, the Stingley debate. I love it.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Woods was a guy under the radar that I really liked.
I like him a lot too. And he's got 9 career interceptions. He's a ball hawk back there. We all joke about the Big 12 as essentially an air raid conference. They're throwing the ball a lot. He was able to get a lot of turnovers for that Baylor team. I think that's a phenomenal pick. He was kind of in my top 20. I didn't necessarily have him in my top 10, but definitely a guy that was consideration, for this list. The guy that I got, former USC guy, former 5-star recruit. He's now at Arizona State, believe it or not. It's not by choice, man. I think we got a pretty garbage, team on the field right now. But Jack Jones, I really like what I've seen from Jack Jones. And you look throughout his career, he's just a very solid corner. He's had over double-digit interceptions in his career. A lot of those being 3, 3, and 4 in the last 3 full seasons he's played. He was the 4th graded highest corner in the Pac-12. And, I think for DBs specifically, that's an area where the Pac-12 has excelled, in recent years in putting out NFL prospects. I'd say only to the SEC do we have the best corners in the Pac-12 traditionally, if you were looking at the draft grades over the past few years. He provides return ability. He's very explosive. And the thing that I love from him this year, he really developed a different side of himself. He developed that peanut punch, so to speak, to knock the ball out. Not only did he have 4 interceptions, but he forced 4 fumbles as well. So when you combine those factors, he had a nice week at the Shrine Bowl. I don't think he's going to be a top pick, but when you add the versatility of him as a returner potentially to all those, feats that I just stated, I think this is a guy that can be a nice rotational corner, maybe a slot nickel corner at the very least, that can help your ball club out. Do you think that's a fair assessment of Jack Jones?
Will, absolutely. And I had a chance to watch Jack Jones live a lot when he was at SC and down here in LA. I think that the comp to him sort of locally a little bit was Darnay Holmes at UCLA from a couple of years ago. What I think we all really loved about Jack Jones was the confidence, the moxie. He was very physical at the point of attack. I think where he struggled at USC was it was either a spectacular play or he got burnt pretty badly. It was sort of that downside protection wasn't there. And so when he went to Arizona State, what I really loved was, as you mentioned, he added the Peanut Tillman punch, but he also had to take on more of a leadership role of not just being another guy at USC, but being kind of the captain of the secondary at Arizona State. And I think that sort of opened up his game, both on the field where he realized he couldn't take as many chances as he did back at USC. And so it tactically and schematically made him a better corner, but it also helped him with the leadership side. So I can definitely see him sort of rising. I think for me, I'm still a little bit worried about the gambling nature. He's a little bit of a riverboat gambler for me, a little bit more for my taste than I would like out of a corner. But there's a lot to like there. And again, situationally, if he goes to the right system and kind of work out even some of those last remaining bad habits, I think you've got a really quality pick there for sure.
And the thing I like about him too is he's a very sure tackler for his size. Yeah. He's kind of an undersized corner, but I watched the open field highlights of him at Arizona State, early time at USC. This guy was making play after play in the secondary when it came to one-on-one tackling with a bigger running back, a bigger receiver for that matter. So I like the ability there. The consistency is going to be an issue for sure. But, like we said, at the end of that draft, 5th, 6th, 7th round, why not? The ability is there for me. And I think Jack Jones would be a home run. Madman, we kind of went through the entire list. I thought this was very well done by the both of us. I do want to bring up one more guy that I may have missed. Skye Moore. Are you familiar with him from Western Michigan?
Yes.
I am all in on this guy, and a lot of people are describing him as Deontay Johnson-like, Julian Edelman-esque in terms of his route running and quickness, explosiveness in the open field. He was a former quarterback and defensive back in high school. 94 catches, close to 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. What he didn't provide, Madman, I know you'll agree with me on this, he did struggle with the likes of playing Michigan this year. So that was kind of a concerning thing. But, Michigan was a top 5 defense in all of college football for my money, given what they were able to do, with the pressure that they were able to bring up front. The Dax Hill is going to be a high second rounder, maybe a late first if he plays his cards right. So a lot of talent there. Maybe his quarterback couldn't get the ball out from what I've been able to see. But Skye Moore is a guy that I definitely like and could be a day one starter at the slot if going to the right system. What do you think about Skye Moore?
Yeah, Will. Very similar. I think that his production at the slot position was really exceptional at Western Michigan. And we've talked a lot about the importance of that slot role in the NFL. It was a red flag to me about the lack of production against elite competition. But we also have to understand and cut some folks some grace and some slack here. When I am playing for a Western Michigan and going up against, a powerhouse in Michigan, not only am I going up against better athletes at just about every position, but those better athletes are now scheming against me as the primary weapon. And so, that it's a domino effect there where I have to sort of scale this mountain, and this mountain is like laser focused on me. Whereas when you go to the NFL, obviously he's not going to be a wide receiver one at the NFL, at least not right away. Cooper Kupp has kind of shattered what is possible with anyone in terms of these prospects, but at least right away he's not going to be wide receiver one. So I think there's going to be an opportunity for him to grow. I loved his ability to route run, those outs, those curls. He was really good, a yard eater. But again, there was just that question about the elite competition. And for me, the only other guy, Will, that we didn't touch in the tight end class, which I'm sort of serving it up to you, and who is in my top 10, our guy, UCLA, Bruin Strong, Mr. Greg Dulsich. We've talked about the Kelsey and the Kittle comparisons probably, but he's someone who is really a hidden gem as a weapon, where he's really emerged in the all-star circuit is as a blocker. We know about the ball skills. We know about his ability to make clutch catches and really be a great offensive weapon. But he's now a blocker, and he was just underutilized at UCLA. And I think that I kept him under the radar. He's going to make a team very happy as well.
Couldn't agree more. And another guy we didn't talk about is Kyle Phillips from UCLA.
Well, yeah. Phillips, I think at this point is no longer a sleeper after, the way he's sort of blown up. I think 3 weeks ago, we would be saying Kyle Phillips is probably number one on our board as a sleeper, but Kyle Phillips is starting to become kind of a cult hero at this point.
I love it, man. And Nate Tice, the great Nate Tice, tweeted this out. He goes, wow, Kyle Phillips, looking at stats, going over game film, he averaged over 20 yards a punt return in his college career. So even if he can't figure it out at the receiver position, which I would bet a lot of money he is able to do, he can help you in a kick return, punt return role that was probably better than most of the guys coming out this year at the very least. Kyle Phillips, Greg Dulcich, our guys, man. And I think people knew how high we were on them, so we couldn't really call them a sleeper to us. But yeah, I think both those guys would be incredibly lucky to go, any team would be incredibly lucky to have those two guys moving forward.
Will is the best receiver that UCLA has had in 30 years since J.J. Stokes.
I love to hear it, man. I think that is a take that is probably accurate when I'm really breaking it down. Kyle Phillips is that dude. Madman, any last thoughts before we sign off from our Draft is in Session sleeper episode?
Will, this was just so much fun. I think you and I had different takes. What I love is that there was, in the Venn diagram, there was enough overlap there where we had a lot of guys who were in our top 10 or very close. And then we had some outliers, which is amazing. And I think that, again, the sleeper is really where the drafts are won and lost. I think you obviously kind of have your blue chip guys, but GMs' reputations over their careers are sort of made off of the sleepers. And I'm really excited about the depth of this draft class. And I think that would be the message to all teams, that even if you've got a 6th round, 7th round pick and you've sort of filled your immediate need of positions, you may find a guy there late in this draft that could actually be the best player in your class. And I think the depth of talent of this year's class has been very strong.
Very strong, to say the least. Madman and I will be back weekly to do Draft is in Session. We're going to upload the Austin Gale interview too to our Draft is in Session feed. PFF blessed us during Radio Row with two of their top guys to come on our draft show. It was such a fun time. Me and Madman were able to cover it. Tune in soon. We will be back. Signing off from LA Football Network, Will Decker and Jamal Madman. We'll talk to you soon.